So today, I'm wearing blue for a change. I thought I would go through data retention guidelines with you because I very often see questions on Facebook about how long should I be retaining this information for, especially from secondary schools. Who am I supposed to pass it on to in primary schools? Can I keep a hold of this information? No, from primary schools as well. And how do I destroy this information when it reaches its expiry date? And I'm specifically going to refer to special educational needs files in this actual video. So I'm going to take you through something called the IRMS toolkit. That's what the DfE have written in the back of their guidance. They've said refer to the IRMS toolkit, and that's where I've always gone for it, but DfE is now agreeing. So we're going to go there, we're going to have a look at the information in there, and that's almost our Bible that tells us exactly where to go to get the information about data retention and about data destruction as well, which is not something we talk about very often in special educational needs, but to stay on the right side of the law, we do need to be aware of it. So I'll see you in a minute with my screen share on. For schools 2019, and I'm going to give it a click here and we can have a look at the different parts within here. So it's quite a comprehensive document, it's about 100 pages long, and I'm going to refer to this section here, pages 12 through to 14, which is about pupil records, and I'm also going to refer to this part down here, which is section 3.4, special educational needs, which is on page 94. However, you can also see it's got things about attendance and it's also got child protection in there and GDPR and a whole variety of other things. So if you really want to go and read it, be my guest. So flicking along to page 12 then, this is what talks about a pupil record. And this is what a pupil record should contain. And here's our special educational needs references and child protection references. And if I click onto the next page, it talks about transferring pupil files. Okay, so a couple of things to be aware of. First one is that the pupil file should be transferred in its entirety. So we shouldn't be weeding anything out. If it was important enough to put in the child's file in the first place, then it must remain in there. The exception to that is if you have any duplicates or if you have anything that has a short retention period that should have been taken out and destroyed, which you must destroy securely. Okay. Within 15 days of any child starting at a new educational provision, then their school file must be transferred across. So 15 school days is 3 weeks or half of a half term. So that's how long it we're given to do it, but the sooner the better. And it says common transfer file, so that's your school MIS information. It's usually done electronically. Any elements that are not held electronically and transferred as part of the CTF. Any SEN information, including behaviour information, because we don't tend to record all of that on our CTF, and any child protection information as well. So this is where the confusion lies. So there are 2 points at which children tend to transfer. So we transfer at the end of a key stage when we're moving to a new school, so for example year 6 into year 7, primary to secondary, or we transfer mid-year where a child moves from one school to another for whatever reason. Perhaps they've moved house or maybe they've fallen out with you, whatever. Okay. So let's just address both of those. Moving from year 6 to year 7, primary to secondary, primary schools should be transferring that information to the secondary school within 15 days of confirmation that they have registered at that school. You usually get that confirmation actually in the July before you break up, so you can transfer the files in the summer, although technically speaking the child doesn't start until September. But from a secondary perspective, I'd rather have the file in the summer and know something about my children before they start. And if they don't turn up, I'm pretty good at finding which school they have gone to pass the file on to them instead. Okay, so that's my primary to secondary, or my transition kind of movement of files. The other one is when they move mid-year. So when a child moves mid-year for whatever reason, again, you must be transferring that file within 15 days. 15 school days. And it should be, like I said, the whole file. It's not supposed to be weeded. You don't get to keep any copies. You're supposed to be sending the whole thing across. Okay, so over here, there are a couple of caveats to that. So certain elements may need to be retained for longer. For example, if you have litigation pending. So if you're being sued by the parent because you've not done the right thing, you may need to keep a copy, probably, of certain elements of the record in order to defend yourself for that. And you would have a solicitor involved at this point, so breaches of GDPR are highly unlikely because you are actually being advised to maintain a copy of that in order to defend yourself. So that would be a reasonable use. The other one might be that you need to keep the information for a short period of time to support with queries and reports. So if a child's in the process of getting an EHCP and the parents can't be bothered to wait at your school, so they've moved them somewhere else, but you know that that school's going to come back to you and say, I don't know anything about them, help! You could keep a copy of that information whilst you are helping that school. However, let's be realistic here. EHCPs, maximum period on that should be 20 weeks. You should not be maintaining that information for any longer than that period of time. And to be perfectly fair, I wouldn't retain it further than half a term, at which point I would turn around to the school and say, look, I don't have the information anymore. They've been with you for at least half a term now. You need to fill it in off your own back. And that sounds really cruel, but I don't want to be in a GDPR breach here. Okay, and I have no legal reason to process that information and keep it anyway. Right, if you are the last known school of a child, so usually this refers to secondary schools, so at a secondary school, or if you have a child that leaves you to go to another country or they leave you to go to elective home education, then you are their last known school. You are therefore responsible for maintaining their file for a hell of a long time. A hell of a long time is 25 years for a ordinary pupil and 31 years for a child with special educational needs. And I'll come to why it's 31 years in a moment. So I'm going to flick to the next page we need to look at. I'm just going to stop the video for a moment and make sure that it's recorded everything and then come back to you. And this time I have flicked through the guide and I'm currently on page 9091 and I'm looking at the Pupil Management Retention Guidelines. So it's the same guide, it's just a table that talks about the different bits. So that pupil management file, their pupil file, this one is to do with the admissions process and how long we keep that kind of information. And the second page here talks about the pupil education record. So this is the first start of that file. And here it talks about primary schools who can only retain files and information whilst the child is at the primary school. So the file must follow the pupil when he or she leaves to another primary school, to a secondary school, or to a pupil referral unit. And actually it also refers to elective home education as well, so you have your caveat within there. And then secondary schools, we're bound by the Limitations Act 1980. We keep a normal file from the date of the pupil to 25 years, in other words, their 25th birthday, and then we review what to do with it. And I'll talk about that in a little moment. And again, we also have child protection information over here as well. Now, you might be thinking why that only says 25 years. That's because it's talking about their normal pupil file. In other words, all those other bits of information about them, like their addresses and their parents' NHS number, or not NHS number, national insurance number, or their free school meal status and things like that. It's those things it's talking about. Okay, over on the next page we have 3.3 for attendance and we have 3.4, which is special educational needs. Their error, not mine, I hasten to add. And down here it talks about 31 years. And the reason SEN files are 31 years is because if a child had an EHCP, that could be valid until the age of 25. And 25 plus 6, last time I checked, I had to take my socks off, but it is 31. So that's why we have to retain that file to the age of 31. And that brings us in line with the Limitations Act. And that Limitations Act is 1980. Our other statutory guidance for this is the CAFA 2014 and the SENDA 2001. Or Children's and Families Act, Special Education Needs and Disabilities Act. Why my screen keeps zooming in? It's annoying me. Right. There is sometimes some confusion. Because it says EHCP over here, people assume it means just for EHCP, and it doesn't. The information is in this column here. It says special educational needs files, reviews, and educational health and care plan, including advice and information provided to parents regarding educational needs and accessibility strategy. In other words, any child who's been on the SEN register, even if they're only on there for 6 weeks, you're maintaining that file until they are 31. Doesn't mean you have to add to it, it just means you have to keep a copy of it until they are 31. So, to recap, primary schools, you must pass on everything to the secondary school or to another primary school if they move. Secondary schools, that applies to you as well. You must pass on the whole of their file to another secondary school if they move during that time. And you need to do it within 15 days of being informed that they've been registered at that school. And you do not weed anything out. It also means you do not maintain a copy of it on your Google Drive just in case. That would mean you are breaching GDPR, you are maintaining information that you have no right to work with. Okay, so secondary schools, sorry, but you're going to have to keep files until children are aged 25 as a minimum, but 31 if they have a special educational need. So secondary schools, we're going to pass that information on. Secondary schools, we're going to keep that information until those children are 31. So if you're in one of those new academies that have absolutely no storage whatsoever, I suggest you look at a porta cabin on the roof to be able to fit the filing cabinets in it. Primary schools, you're lucky, you're supposed to be passing it on. My biggest worry is, especially from talking to SENCOs, they will say things to me like, oh yeah, I sent the paper file across, but I've got a copy on my hard drive just in case. Please don't tell me that, because you are in breach of GDPR. You are breaking data retention guidelines. You are retaining information that you have no right to read and to process beyond that child's life in your school. So please don't do it. So that was a quick video, not that quick, about data retention guidelines, the IRMS toolkit. Like I say, I'll leave the link on the screen so that you can go and have a look at that guidance for yourself. And hopefully it was of some use to you to make sure that you are not in breach of GDPR or of any other statutory guidance that's around out there. As always, if you've got any questions, drop me an email and please give me a thumbs up. Perhaps subscribe to the channel. I am aiming for 240,000 minutes at some point. I'm nowhere near it. So, just watch me while you're in the shower, please. That sounds wrong. I'm going. Bye-bye.